Welcome to the Hopium Podcast, hosted by Jp3g and Burmpf. As always, this is not financial advice.
All right, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Hopium Podcast. Today's a very, very special episode. I'm very excited to introduce somebody that you probably have heard of. He's been around. He's an OG for a long time now. Welcome, Knox. How we doing, man?
What's up, guys? Thank you for having me. It's been a
Thank you,
while
sir.
since, it's been a minute since I've done a podcast interview. I think the last one I did was like Thugbird's podcast when they did that. That was cool.
It
feels good.
I'd like to hear that one.
It was a while ago. I think it was
Yeah, I
actually
can
the day
imagine.
I dressed up. The day I dressed up in all the shit. And,
Okay.
and I recorded that interview dressed up.
You still own the Thugbird?
No, I do not own the Thugbird.
Or did you ever, I guess?
I owned a Thugbird. I just in traditional Knox style, bought the very top of it and sold on the way
Yikes.
Oh,
down.
no.
So like what, 100 plus?
Look, yeah, I think it was like 110. It was a zombie.
Okay.
And he had like a bunch of attributes, but like I do not like typically barrel into NFT projects on day one. Like
Yeah.
I let them find their ground and their identity and like establish a price, and that's why I always buy after it's taken off. And usually I go in big too, and
Fair.
I feel like super enthusiastic about it, and I'm ready to tweet about it, and that's when
Sure.
it all falls to shit. So
Yeah. Fair enough. Dude, I wanted a Thugbird for so long. I mean, I almost did so many times pull the trigger on one. Never did, but
I mean, you could do it for nostalgia now.
it's almost
they're
like
pretty
it's
cheap
almost
now.
that point where it's like you have one just to say you own one now, like a
Yeah.
memeable thing.
You were around when it
but-
happened.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So SMBs and Thugbirds, man. Anyways, no. So for those that don't know you, just real quick, if you don't know Knox, which I'm assuming most of you do, just give us a quick rundown. How'd you get into Solana? How'd you end up here? Your content, kind of just who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with crypto. I started crypto in 2017, just in time to buy the top of that and get imploded. And then I kind of took a little bit of a break from probably around 2019 to 2020. But, you know, I felt like I at least learned a lot about how markets move with the ICOs at that point. And then COVID happened. Everybody was bored. Really, Wall Street bets took off right around then and pumped GameStop and AMC to the moon. And that's when Apes Strong Together became the thing. That's where Apes really came from.
Okay.
And then from there, towards the end of 2020 and starting into 2021 was the crypto bull run. So that's when Elon started tweeting about Bitcoin and everything started to go on a run again. And that's when I decided, all right, I'm going to get back into crypto big time. So probably early 2021, like before the base event and everything like that, I was starting to like do big DCAs back into crypto and get back into the space. And DeFi was big back then. It was like the end of DeFi summer effectively. So I was trying to leverage a whole lot of DeFi. I was big into the Polygon scene because fuck Ethereum DeFi. So I was all about Polygon DeFi, and I got annihilated with Mark Cuban on Titan. And
I remember that actually.
yeah. And then, you know, around that time, Solana was just really starting to be relevant. They weren't even on like Coinbase yet. I think Solana was like $8 or something. So I grabbed some Solana off Bitmart, and just to dabble in the ecosystem, just to kind of just see what it feels like, because it had pretty colors, right? So
yeah.
and whatever apps that were there at the time, which there were only like 4 of them, there was like Step, Mango, and Radium. They were really well done apps. Like they looked good, they felt good, they were a lot different from the Pancake Swap clones that all DeFi was. So I started dabbling in Solana DeFi, and like just like everybody who uses Solana, you use it and you're like, oh, this is better. Like this is, you use it once and you're like, oh, that's it. Well, at the exact same time, this is when NFTs were really starting to become a thing. That's when the punks were really taking off, and BASE had minted. I didn't mint BASE. They were 2 or 3 Ethereum at the time. And then everybody was like, the Vogue. The Vogue is the next BASE. Look at that art. And to this day, I still swear that they are some of the coolest art I've ever seen. They're like if you've seen the movie Chappie, but they're in like hoodies and they're like smoking a joint or something. It's like that.
Okay.
That's what the Vogue was. And that was going to be the first BASE killer. There were like 7 more since then. So I aped into the Vogue. And that's when I realized NFTs were addictive. And then the whole time I'm like, man, I wish Solana had NFTs, Solarians and SMB, and I minted those things, and the rest is history. So I became pretty addicted to the addictive things that should come with the Surgeon General's warning.
Sure. What was your first buy on Solana, like price wise? I'm curious. Do you remember?
It would have been anywhere between $8 and $12.
Okay.
Whatever that swap was. And then like the day they launched on Coinbase, I kind of started moving everything over to just buying on Coinbase. And I think it was like $21 or $22 the day it launched. And I was buying there from then on. And
Gotcha.
I pretty routinely DCA every paycheck. Like when I get paid, like whatever is left over after bills and stuff, it just goes to Solana now. But that's primarily to support my validator.
Okay. Well, that actually kind of brings up one of the 2 topics that we want to get into next. So we'll get to the validator in a second.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk to you about kind of like what you're doing on Twitter now. You kind of changed the pace a little bit with the paid promos and being open about that, which I think everybody can appreciate, that you're being kind of open and honest about it, because it's been a hot topic with people and influencers and discussing, what they're being allocated, what they're being paid, right? So kind of talk a little bit about that. How's that going? How has it been?
So I mean, it's weird. It's totally different. it's totally different. Just different. So like I'm doing it to support the validator node. Running a validator is extremely expensive. And it costs like literally every second that it's up. It's literally just firing off transactions. Every vote that it does on every block that happens on the blockchain costs.
Okay.
And it's like literally just firing off votes nonstop. And you pay the Solana transaction fee for every one of those votes.
Oh, wow.
So the validator just burns money. Like it just eats right through it. So, bear market happens. You lose a lot of money, you lose a lot of soul. You're a bad investor like I am when it comes to NFTs because you believe too much. And next thing you know, you got to figure out, okay, well, where is this endeavor going to go? I need to come up with some sort of money to fund this thing because right now it's coming into my paycheck and that money should be going to my kids instead. So that's why I'm doing it. Now, why did I never do it in the first place? Because there's a moment of it where it feels dirty. Like it does feel a little dirty the first few times you do it because you're tweeting about something that you may or may not actually believe in, but they paid you. And as long as you disclose it, they paid you. Like, everybody should know that this is not coming from the heart. So that's, when I got started in NFTs, that's when I started following Function. This was like back in May. Function had like 2,500 followers back then. Like he was tiny, but from day one, he was very clear that he didn't do paid ads. And I always respected him for that. And that's why I never wanted to do it too, is because, you felt like you were dealing with someone who wasn't purchased to say one of those things. That line blurred a little bit as Twitter and paid promos and everything changed. You saw things like DAOs become a thing, and then allocations and block allocations started going to DAOs. That's pretty fresh on everybody's mind. And nobody's disclosing that because it's not necessarily a paid promo. That was an allocation that went to the DAO and not necessarily to the person. There was also, are there agreements on whether or not they're allowed to sell? Like it's a really messy business right now because there are no rules. There's no regulation in place. So everybody can kind of just do whatever they want to do. So anyways, fast forward a little bit, that was the early days of crypto and Twitter and everything like that. And paid promos weren't really a thing the way they are today in the first place, because there were no whitelists. There was no giveaways. There was just tweet about this thing. And usually there were only like 5 projects around. You could only tweet about 5 projects.
Right.
They weren't launching 5 a day. Candy Machine wasn't even a thing, but even Ethereum, like everybody was going to tweet about these NFTs anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why paid promos, the business evolved itself in the sense that more projects launch on scale today because the ability to deliver projects quickly is very easy now. And that wasn't always the case.
Mm-hmm.
So you could very easily, like DJ Ape Academy, SMB, Rogue Sharks, because Rogue Sharks came on the scene immediately after DJ Ape Academy. There were only a handful of projects around. It took forever to deploy them. And just by the mere essence of being early, you could easily build an organic audience in the first place. You never had to pay anyone. Everybody was just going to talk about it. So there was that. Then starting around September, I started doing YouTube videos. My first big one was the geckos. And then a big one I did was, I think I covered rogue sharks at one point. I covered the lions, jungle cats. Meerkats were obviously another one that I'm just rubbing my head on. And I did all of that for completely free. Like nobody paid me anything. Lots of times they would be like, look, like we're going to tip you. We're going to make you a custom. And then like literally not one of them ever did. It was just like empty promises. So starting around January, I said I wasn't going to do YouTube anymore because I looked back on how many hours, how many days I spent making that content, arranging interviews, editing the footage, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I probably lost like 6 digits worth of my income by like my IRL job just by not doing it. It's like, and that hurt because then the market tanked and I looked at all the money I could have made, where I actually spent my time instead. And now what am I left with? A wallet that's down 80%. So, and I'm like, man, fuck this. Like that sucked. Like that hurt. And in January, I decided I'm going to pivot back to the things that I'm good at. And that's the technology, that's dev, and that's infrastructure. So I'm interviewing Pit the Panda and I'm asking him like how you get started becoming a Web3 developer on Solana. And he's saying, you got to chew glass. That's what you have to do. You just have to like go through the grit because there's no good training content. There's no good way to get started. And that's when I was like, well, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to change that. I'll chew the glass so that other people don't have to. And I did. I spent like the next 4 months, instead of recording content for YouTube, I spent the next 4 months recording a training course in collaboration with my employer. It was a weird deal that's kind of hard to explain.
Sure.
But anyways, that course is now available. It's free to watch for now. It's not going to be free forever, but it's at least a kickstart for people who know basic JavaScript and nothing more. So if you've watched a YouTube video to learn basic JavaScript in 30 minutes to an hour, you are prepped to go to the Web3 course that I created. Because literally like the first module, we like walk through, like, here's how you install the apps that you need. Here's how you configure the layout on the screen to look like this. Like we literally hold the hand and walk through the most basic setup and hello world stuff all the way until you've written complex smart contracts, deployed your own candy machine, created your own staking site. Like we cover those things. So that took a huge chunk of time. And then meanwhile, the market isn't recovering. NFTs aren't booming. Everything still sucks. And I decide like, all right, well, I'm going to do my part. And the thing that I'm best at in this world is running infrastructure. It's running servers. That is what I've done professionally for a really long time. So I'm going to do it in the Web3 infrastructure world. And I'm going to deploy a validator. And that was a degen move for as like if a systems engineer or network engineer could be a degen, that was it. Because I walked through the guide to spin this node up and then figured out after the fact, what does it do? And like, how much does it cost? And that, what I found out really quickly was like, this is really, really expensive. You need to come up with like a feed of money coming into this thing because it's just going to go right back out. So kind of, the long story short of it is, man, like I've been operating this thing for 2 months. I love it. It is so much fun. I am building a brand around it. I'm operating on multiple blockchains now. I'm in Aptos and Sui as well. I've dabbled in Near and Celestia. So like Juicy Steak is going multi-chain, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still expensive. So I'm now looking at like, okay, what are the other ways that people can make money in Web3? Because I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, and it's not working. And there is this idea, there's this conspiracy out there, maybe true, maybe false, that certain influencers get huge allocations, huge whitelists, paid huge amounts of money under the table. They dump all this NFTs on their followers. They dump whatever on their followers. And I kind of made it a point to where like, I don't want to be that guy, at least not at that scale that the accusations are happening on.
Yeah.
Whether it's mint and then recover costs, I think that's a lot different from mint and then make hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of SOL. I think those are two different things. So I have tried my best to just avoid minting in general. In recent history, I minted 7 Rakudos and sold 3 to recoup costs. I minted an OK Bear. I minted 2 Trippin' Apes. I minted 1 or 2 Trippy Worlds. And I think that's it. Like, I'm really just not touching NFT mints or flips or anything like that. When I was in Enigma, like they were a whitelist machine. They got so many whitelists, it's insane. And I think I was like the second worst member in there behind Solana Legend. He's the only person I can say like absolutely did not mint anything because he just didn't pay attention. And I was like right there, right behind him. Like I didn't mint anything either because I wasn't paying attention or because I just wasn't interested in the project. Yeah. So minting and flipping, using my audience to like secretly work deals and allocations or whatever, that's not what I want to do. And all of the other venues, I kind of feel like I exhausted it. So what's left? That's selling paid promos. And and if I can do it, I'm going to do it in the most transparent way possible. I don't want anybody to feel like I misled them or I endorsed a project without being paid or whatever the case was. Like if they pay me to talk about their project, trust me when I say that's not an endorsement. Like I was literally just paid, like I'm a billboard effectively. Like they just put up their sign and then the algorithm makes it disappear into space after like 30 minutes. So the main reason I did that is because there are promoters out there who are making extraordinary money. Over 20 SOL a day is what some of these dudes are making. Like, we're talking over 100 SOL a week. Selling promos. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can do that, but be clean and not do it in excess, like no more than 4 a day type of thing, spread out across 24 hours, then that will give me enough income to supplement running this validator node. Gotcha. So, and then take the money that I was spending on the validator node and put it back towards my family, which is the goal. Cool. So I think your original question was, how's it going? Like I ran 4 for the first day, 4 for the second day, 1 today, and have had no inquiry since. Okay. So it's not as good for me as it is for other promoters. But whatever. I mean, at least it's out there now. And if something comes along and I can just take some more SOL and put it back on my validator node, then cool. That's the plan.
I really like the way that you do it with using the hashtag ag. And like telling people how they can like avoid those if that's not something that they want to see. Because I've definitely seen time and time again different influencers and people that give these ads, and there's no way for you to tell that they're an ad. And I think these projects, that's their whole mindset behind it. And I can see why they wouldn't want to like go to you, because they're like, well, if it doesn't seem like it's like authentic from him, but like ethically, like that's the best way to do it. Like even with like YouTube sponsorships, for example, right? Like you have to like disclose the fact that you're being paid by the person giving you like the ad. So it's super scummy for people to be like, oh hey, like these are like representing my views, and then it's like something that they don't actually care about, and it's
No, they got paid to say that. Like,
yeah.
And I mean, it's just like any other thought whore. Like, I'll say whatever you want if you give me $100. Like, it's
Right.
kind of, and that's kind of what it is. But it's also what a billboard is, and that's what these influencers across Web 2 and Web 3 are being paid to do. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. These people are making ungodly amounts of money by promoting products because they're really just a talking billboard. Is really what it is. So
sponsored, I guess.
Yeah, it's sponsored, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had one project, so I've got a price list now that somebody DMs me, what are your prices? Here's my prices. The first thing I'll say is my price list is broken down into 3 sections. The first one is tweets, and at the header it says tweets, and it says will contain hashtag ad, so they know what they're buying. The second one is live events, that's Twitter Spaces and YouTube, and it says will disclose that this is a promotion at the beginning of each event. And under Spaces, I put will not hold back. And not too surprisingly, no one has taken me up on Spaces yet. And I also priced those really high as an attempt to like weed out bad projects,
Sure.
but really good projects who have inquired about that have asked like, well, are you flexible on this? Is it negotiable? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I've had one, I'm going to call it an A+ project, has reached out for YouTube. And that's about it, but we're still a long way away from actually doing it. So when the time comes, it'll be disclosed, and then I'll go about doing whatever it is that I do in the YouTube video, which quite frankly, I'm kind of excited about because it's cool. And then the third section is threads, and it says like, we'll disclose promotion in the thread. So it'll start out by saying like, I'm partnering with them, via a paid capacity to perform this thread. But what I do with the thread is the big bulk of the chunk of the money goes to me researching their project. Like I will read their white paper, understand their tokenomics, understand their utility, and then I'm going to break down in English terms how it really works within 10 tweets. So like those are the services that I'm offering, and I'm going to disclose promotion wherever it is. Though I think the interesting thing about it is there are like blatant paid shills. That's the tweet section. And then there's like, help your audience understand what we're doing. Yeah. That's Spaces, Threads, and YouTube. Because, maybe we just don't have the right message put together to explain why we're different or what we're doing that's different. And that's really where I think my audience gravitates towards. That's why I think 70,000 people followed me in the first place, was because I like broke down things. And very interestingly, like, only one project has been interested in a YouTube video. Nobody else has asked about the threads or the spaces. So
I think that says a lot about the project. I'm just gonna guess.
Yeah,
level.
I mean,
kind of a shame too.
Yeah, it is kind of a shame. I really want, if you're really proud of your project, then that's what I'm here for. Is like talk about it then.
It's an investment.
Meet me in Spaces and let's talk about it. Like, if you're proud about it, you shouldn't be afraid to be asked hard questions.
Right.
And
completely agree.
And I'm going to ask some hard questions, but if you can answer them, I might become very enthusiastic about your project. This is your chance to not only sell me, but also sell the listeners in the Spaces or the YouTube or the thread too. So I was really hoping that more projects would have inquired about that. But for the most part, like everybody just wants to buy like 2 quote tweets. And that's even funnier because there's like no engagement on a quote tweet. There's plenty of engagement on giveaways. Give away 1 soul or something like that and pay me 4 soul to run it for 24 hours. But no, nobody wants to do that either. So
have you actually been on, now that I've never seen your name pop up on Twitter Spaces. Do you ever pop in there? Have you ever been in one?
No, I mean, I try to spend my time, like if I can work, like I try to spend my time working. But I would dedicate my time to Spaces just to be interested to hear how projects react to my questions and questioning. Okay. It would feel a lot like my old YouTube videos where I would sit down to interview projects, but to be fair, back then I was very selective and I only reached out to projects that I knew were going to be a big deal, that had their shit together, at least in the early days. You know, obviously we know how a lot of those worked out. But like they made for good interviews because these were business people who knew how to at least operate some form of business. They had some sort of vision, and everything in Web3 back then was exciting. So, you know, if I just wish I could come across more projects that still felt that way, that weren't already established in the top 10. I've had a conversation or two with one that might have been a good fit for it, but so far it's just been like paid quote tweets. And I mean, it's fine if that's what they want, but it's not what I want. It's not what I want.
Yeah, probably not as engaging for you. I mean, and it makes sense, especially if you find things that you're interested in and can bring a benefit to the ecosystem. I get like the idea behind it.
I had a call with one project just before you guys that they're doing something special in the security realm, and something that can make consumers in Web3 more secure. But that was the only project that's reached out, and they weren't the one that wanted to do the YouTube thing. They wanted to do something different, and they were the only one that made me go like, okay, like, you know, 1 out of every 50 turns out to be like a real, like they're here to make the space better. Like I can, you know, give me a win somewhere. Like,
sure. Well, Burmpf, did you have any other questions about that before we move on?
No, I think I covered it for me.
Cool. So moving on a little bit. I mean, we already talked about it just a little bit. Is your Juicy stake, right? As somebody who has staked with Juicy Validator, there's not a lot that because I've looked into it up to like a very, very like surface level into it. And when we both had Coral Bears, I remember us talking about it a little bit, and we had this idea that it was 5K sold to start one, when you talk about votes and what that means, because I don't really understand what you mean when you say vote, I guess. I'm not sure if others do. But so I guess to get into it, like, how did you get started? What was the startup cost, equipment wise, like what equipment is involved, and the upkeep? I mean, you've mentioned there's a lot of upkeep, and so just curious to learn about anything and everything about the validator.
So startup costs are actually minimal, except it's the ongoing operation cost that's pretty bad. Now, I think I'm under an NDA with the Solana server program where I can't disclose the exact amount that I pay per month, but I'll tell you it's greater than $500, less than $1,000. So you rent your server effectively from a cloud provider, but instead of going to a public cloud like Azure or AWS or Google, there are data centers, which are facilities that host servers for people. There are data centers around the world, really, where you tell them, I need this kind of server deployed. Let me know what the IP address is, and I'll log into it and take it from there. So they call that bare metal hosting. So you get a physical piece of metal server that's running somewhere in the world that you can log into remotely and configure the server from there. And Solana, through the Solana Foundation, they partnered with lots of different data center providers around the world to negotiate monthly costs given the amount of specs that are needed to run the server. So Solana does require very powerful servers to get up and running. This is in contrast to many other blockchains, if not most other blockchains. Solana, so my server, I can tell you the specs. It has 48 cores, Intel Xeon, but it is preferred to use AMD EPYC, though 48 cores of Intel Xeon works, 512 gigs of RAM, and 2 terabytes of NVMe storage with a 500 gig SSD for the operating system. So pretty beefy as far as servers go. The storage is probably the most expensive component in that. NVMe storage is very, very fast, but it is very, very expensive, and it's a little bit more durable than an SSD. So the Solana blockchain, the reason why it's so stinking fast is because these validator nodes can process a tremendous amount of transactions very quickly. So the way a blockchain works, it is literally a chain of blocks. Now, what goes inside a block? That is all the transactions that you can possibly stuff into a bit of data. It's kind of like if you had an Excel file where the max size of the Excel file was 1 megabyte. And what we were trying to do was we were trying to shove as many transactions into that 1 megabyte as we could. Once it's full, that's a block and it gets cemented on the blockchain. When it's on the blockchain, those transactions have taken place. The very next block that comes along may change those transactions even further. So I send you 1 SOL, that goes in the first block. And now, since it's in that block, the 1 SOL now shows up in your wallet. You then send that 1 SOL further down the train, and that shows up in the next block. So we're trying to shove a humongous amount of transactions into a block as quickly as possible. And Solana, the thing that makes it so fast is these gigantic servers around the world are able to do it. They're able to shove that many transactions into a block, and they process blocks very, 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 very quickly. Hundreds of thousands of blocks get effectively, like basically 100,000 plus blocks get processed a day. So it's a lot of transactions that get shoved into one block, and that's how we can do 3,000, 4,000 transactions per second. Now, when it comes to voting, the way it really works is Solana, as it stands right now, has effectively just over 2,000 validators. One of them, only one, at any given moment, is given the chance to create the next block. So what that validator does, it's known as the leader. The leader is, it knows it's my turn to be the leader. I'm going to shove all of these transactions into a block, and now all of the other validators around the world have to vote if that block works. And what they do is they literally take the proposed block and they replay every single transaction in the block, every single one. And as long as it passes, as long as I send 1 SOL to you, and then every other validator in the world confirms that that 1 SOL would succeed because I have 1 SOL to send to you, then that is how, once 60% confirmation happens, that is how the block becomes confirmed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my validator, it can, in what we call an epoch, it's about 2.5 days. In one epoch, my validator produces about 100 blocks on the blockchain. The other remaining 399,990 blocks are created by different validators. And that means the rest of the time, my validator is trying to vote on all of these potential proposed blocks. Sometimes it doesn't. Most validators successfully vote around 80% of the time. The other 20% of the time, they just missed their chance. They were too slow. They were too far behind. Stuff was happening too quickly. So about 80% of the time, there is a successful vote on all of the transactions. That is where your APY comes from. You as a staker, that is where your APY comes from. So when I land a successful vote, my validator gets a credit. At the end of the epoch, Solana looks at all of the validators' accumulated credits. So in my case, I may accumulate 360,000 credits. Solana will look at, okay, Juicy Stake did 360,000 credits, and it has 70,000 SOL on it. So we're going to take that into our little calculation, and this is how much SOL they get back as a reward. The more successful votes I have, the higher my APY goes. So that's why we have like 5 validators in the ecosystem that have actually like hacked the Solana source code itself to make their vote success rate even higher. And that's how they can get even more higher APY. You see that with like Cogent Crypto or a couple other guys. They call it running mods. You modify the blockchain code effectively to just land more successful votes. So that's why there are some validators that do a better APY than others. It's because of how voting works and squeezing every last drop of juice out of the lemon to get as many successful votes as you can.
That's cool. Because I've heard the term votes thrown around, right? And I had no idea what that meant. So
Yeah.
that's kind of cool to see. And I mean, that just honestly hearing you kind of talk about the technology and how this works, it's hard not to be bullish on Solana and the potential of what could be built.
It's
And
insane the level of detail and thought that went into it before the first block was ever created.
for
Like
sure.
I don't think like, and I'm a relatively smart guy. I don't think I could have ever come up with a scheme like that, like on day one. And the fact that they did just kind of blows my mind. And it works, like it works
Yeah.
really well. So
Sure.
I think it's really cool.
And, you know, it's fat. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the nerd in me, but hearing you talk about it is very, it's fascinating. So when somebody stakes their soul, there's also a commission. Is that
Mhm.
what helped? Is that just help you? Is that what that does?
So validators make money in right now 2 ways. The first one is, let's say my node is the leader. I get to produce the next block. When I create that block and that block becomes confirmed, I get 50% of all of the Solana fees in that block.
Okay.
So when you pay the 0.00005
Yeah.
for your transaction, when we stuff 100,000 transactions into a block or whatever, even though it's more like 4,000 transactions, half of those fees go to the validator that was the leader that produced the block. The other half gets completely burned. It's gone for forever. So that's the first way that validators get money. There's a catch to it. You only get to produce 4 blocks for effectively every 3,000 SOL you have staked. So if I had 30,000 SOL staked on my validator, for each epoch, I could produce 40 blocks. Now, that effectively translates to like 0.01 SOL worth of fees. So basically, you have to have a humongous amount of stake in order to make any sort of significant money from like block fees, from actually creating the block. The rest of the way you make up the money is through the commission. So when you stake your SOL, and let's just take a flat number like 6% APY, that's what's advertised everywhere. I'm going to take 5% of that 6%. So that is 0.3% that I'm going to take. Your effective APY then becomes 5.7% APY because I took 5% of the 6%. So this is the other reason. There's 2 reasons why you see different APYs on validators. The first one is some are more successful at voting than others. And the second one is that they offer different commissions. And the way you can think about it is for every 5% of commission, that's 0.3% of APY.
Okay.
So the way it shook out is I think the most validate, like the majority of validators charge 8% commission is the way it shakes out. But you're seeing more and more offer 0% commission because they probably have so much stake on their validator that they can get enough off block fees to cover their entire operation. Or perhaps they self-staked, which is a different method. You can stake your own SOL to yourself, and you get to keep your own commission from doing that.
Okay.
And everybody else can stake for 0%. Or you see a lot of validators charging 10% commission. And the reason for that is I'm going to tell, this isn't official, and don't quote me. Please, whoever's listening, don't sue me on this. But it's because they could get a grant from Solana Foundation.
Oh.
So Solana Foundation has a tremendous amount of SOL, as you would expect from the Solana Foundation. And what they did to help kickstart or bootstrap the actual blockchain itself was validators around the world could apply for a large stake delegation to run their operations. That way, Solana could ensure that these people were profitable and it will contribute to decentralization because these people will continue to be able to fund and operate their operations. For me, and in America, we are disqualified from getting a grant. So whereas some people are getting 50, 100, 200,000 SOL stake, whatever the case is, I don't know the exact numbers. I get 0 from Solana. So being American, it's very hard to kickstart that journey in getting grant. But the people who are not in America and got a humongous grant from Solana, set it to 10%.
Sure.
Like,
Is that because of taxes, or what is the?
I think it's something to do with being like like a security or accredited investor, or
Okay.
because there's Solana is actually two businesses. There's Solana Labs and Solana Foundation. The foundation operates more like a nonprofit or a charity, whereas Labs, that's like where the phone is coming from. That's where they're actually making money. So I think it's because of, regulations and being a nonprofit is really what that comes down to, and giving money back to a American citizen who is then making profit off of the initial funding. I think that's where it becomes messy, and they just didn't touch it.
That's a lot more complex than I guess I would have ever imagined. I didn't know that. I mean, that's crazy.
I learned all of this stuff after I deployed the node.
Sure.
Oh no.
So actually, the thing that gave me the courage to deploy the node was some Marinade Finance and the liquid staking pools. So for small operators like me, without liquid staking pools, we'd be dead. We'd be dead in the water. Marinade Finance has over 50,000 SOL, or the overwhelming majority, on my validator right now. And the reason that really pushed me to do it was they implemented something new called validator gauges. So anyone who held their native token, the Marinade token, they could vote to dedicate a portion of their giant pool of SOL specifically to a specific validator. So Marinade, by default, like, they just have an algorithm, and every epoch it looks at basically the top 200 or the top 450 validators based on performance, uptime, and credits, and SOL gets delegated to those validators based on their performance. And it happens automatically. They decided, let's take 10% of our pool and allow people to vote on their favorite validator and where we should move that pool. So when they implemented that about 2 months ago, that was the thing that pushed me into doing it. I was like, okay, well, I can go take my SOL, I'll buy a huge chunk of Marinade, and then leverage that to get even more SOL. Because it's something like, at the time, it was like for every 10 SOL you bought, you were going to get like 1,000 SOL staked on your validator, is the way it worked at the time.
That's
now
pretty
it's
good.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I was like, oh, well, I'll be in profit in no time.
Yeah.
So but that became diluted as more validators started to enter the pool, and more people started to buy Marinade to vote on different validators. So it's not as effective. Now it's like for every 1 SOL, you can get effective for every 1 SOL that you use to buy Marinade, then you can delegate about 30 SOL to your validator. It's the way it works. So that was what gave me the courage to get started and break into profitability. But like I said, for every vote that I do, which is hundreds of thousands of votes per epoch, it charges a Solana fee. So they've tweaked it over time. It's not as worse as it used to be, but right now it costs about 0.6 to 0.7 SOL per day to operate a validator, or roughly 1.6 to 1.8 SOL per epoch, or every 2.5 days, just to run your validator. And it's not like a flat comes out once. It's like literally, I have a chart that I use to monitor my server, and it's like literally just a negative slope line, just monitoring the balance of my account. And it's just going down, and that's all it does. It just fires off votes. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make enough in block rewards and commission to offset that burn, first of all. And then once you've offset that, then you have to make up your hardware costs, because while all this is going on, I'm paying somebody a flat fee per month to run my server. So it ends up being a pretty expensive endeavor. And then you throw running RPCs into the mix, and I do that too. And that becomes significantly more expensive. So
you almost, it sounds like if you hit a certain point of the amount of SOL that's on your validator, it can sustain itself. Is that what I understand?
So, and the price of SOL plays a big factor into that too. As it stands right now, I have 68,600 SOL roughly staked on my validator.
Oh, wow.
That is enough to cover my vote costs. No problem. Vote costs are covered. I still need about another 40,000 SOL staked to cover the hardware costs too. But Yeah. So you need, if your commission is 5%, you're going to need about 100,000 soul stake to break even.
Let me just pull out my piggy bank and get you 40K soul real
Yeah,
quick.
I know, right? So, but that's where like you've got, you know, staking pools. And if you're not American, the Solana Foundation, I mean, you can have that in a month.
Damn.
If you're a performant validator and you're not American, it's not that hard. The hard part is at that point, it's just deploying the server. And I've gotten it down to a point now where I could probably have like from nothing at all to an operating validator in probably an hour. So
that's cool. The hardware isn't actually in your home though.
No, mine is in Billings, Montana right now.
Okay.
So the validator's in Billings, Montana. The RPC is in Dallas. I also, for the infrastructure, for like Aptos and SWE, I have stuff in London, New York, and Miami. So
this just sounds like just all going right over my head.
No,
I feel like a fucking plebeian, just like listening, like trying to follow what the fuck you're saying.
It's really not bad. Like it's like I just click and point and say deploy the server, and they deploy the server and tell me what IP address I need to log into. And then I have one app called Secure CRT. It's what it's called. And I organize. It's like a little folder structure. And I'm like, here's your RPC node. Here's your validator node. Now here's Aptos and here's that node. And it's all just organized. I just double click on it and boom, I'm logged in. So,
I mean, you make it sound simple.
It's something that like I could teach and it would be simple. But the actual, like the Solana validator node is one of the things where like people who are new to systems administration should not attempt it because it is challenging enough to where you might not do well at it and you won't get rewards, you won't get stake, it will cost you a fuck ton of money. So that's why I'm like, for people who have been in IT for like a year and know what the cloud is and what SSH is, like you're probably good enough to do it. You just follow the instructions in the document. And that's why for like someone like me who's done this for like a really long time in like cloud architecture and stuff, like this is like the actual tech side of it was like 1% of my time. The business side of it, circling back to like, okay, well now I got to run paid promos to fund this thing. Like that's where the challenge is. It's coming up with 100,000 soul to stake on it. Otherwise you run it at a loss. And don't even get me started on the RPCs. The RPCs are the same exact thing as a validator. Same exact code, same exact setup steps, except for like one tiny difference. That's it. And it has to be run on the maximum amount of like hardware you can afford because those RPCs take a beating. Like they're the first layer of defense for the Solana blockchain. They get twice as much bullshit as the validators do. So keeping those things alive are brutal and you don't get rewards. There's no commission. There's no staking on an RPC. The only way you make money on an RPC is you charge someone to use your RPC.
Okay, and I've heard that before with like bots and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the RPCs, how are they different from the validators then?
The only difference is they don't vote. They see every block that gets created, but they don't vote. So since they don't vote, they don't collect stake, they don't collect rewards. They literally have the entire blockchain and process the entire blockchain up front. Then when you click send in your Phantom wallet, transactions hit the RPC server first. And they look at it and think, okay, do I think this would pass first inspection? Do I think a validator would validate this confirmation? If the answer is yes, they send it downstream to a validator for processing. But sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes this is like a fake transaction or, it's got a bad payload. I'm not going to bother the validators with it. So they get hit with twice as much traffic for no reward.
So do you have to run a node when you have the validator or is that just optional?
Nope, I did that because I wanted to be a part of the Shadow protocol with Genesis Go.
Okay.
So Genesis Go, like their business was running RPCs. So they have a validator, like a single validator, but their business was providing RPCs. So anybody who wanted to develop an application on Solana, when somebody clicked confirm, that application had to send that transaction somewhere. So they sent it to Genesis Go, and Genesis Go charged them for that until they
Okay.
did the NFT mint. Then the NFT mint, they raised enough funds to where they could offer the RPCs for free.
Okay. And
So-
so that's why bot, like, because I remember I dabbled a while back in like a sniping bot when
Mhm.
mints were like on fire, and it was hard to, you couldn't buy on the secondary.
Yep.
Almost without a bot. And so I remember I was looking into it, and then people started talking about, well, you can rent out RPC nodes.
Mhm.
Now, I'm assuming there's a kind of a limit, or they can only handle so much traffic.
Yep.
To where, so okay, all right.
Yep.
I'm starting
But
to
that's
connect
why
dots
if you get your own dedicated node, nobody's hitting your node with traffic.
so you would just be
so-
able to snipe. Okay.
Damn, like it's in. And with an RPC node, you can tell it like prefer to use that validator. So if they're like literally sitting next to each other in the server rack, you're getting like sub-millisecond communication times. And that's why, they're like, okay, these RPC providers, they probably are running a validator behind the scenes. Maybe they minted an NFT project to raise a huge amount of SOL.
Gotcha.
So that they self-stake it, and now that validator is profitable, and now they can guarantee fastest confirmation times because everything's happening next to each other so quickly.
Almost simultaneously. Okay, that's cool.
Yep.
So the RPC node, it's still expensive to run, though, is my understanding.
Oh yeah, I mean, because you have to buy the most expensive hardware. With validators, you can dial it back a little bit, but with RPC nodes, like you have to have the best processor, best RAM, the most amount of storage that you can possibly buy on NVMe, and you're not going to get a penny of rewards for doing it.
So then I think that's why you see projects that like label it as like, hey, you can rent my node.
Yep.
If you're going to use it. So then
No, I mean that like if they're just using their RPC, it's probably just sitting there idle.
Okay.
So, but it's costing them a damn fortune.
Okay.
So they're like, yeah, we'll share some of our load with you. Go ahead.
Okay. So Burmpf, have you ever used like a sniping bot or even tried?
No.
Yeah, the one time I did, and I'm trying to think of what mint it was, because it was back when it was during the heyday mints, man. I think it was actually, it was like Bobos of War or something.
Yeah, I remember Bobos.
I
Yeah.
think that was gonna
Yeah.
come to like, and it just had a shit ton of hype, and I didn't get whitelist for it because I didn't really try. But I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to snipe these off the secondary. So I bought a sniping tool, just trying to set that up, because I am not tech savvy really at all. Like I was like, okay, I can't even like trying to connect it to like an RPC node.
Yeah.
Then they have like the instructions on how to do that. And I was like, you know what, whatever. Like,
Yeah,
and
and they whitelist IPs is what they do. Like they don't want anybody hitting their RPC. Because I could tell you, like, oh, here's my RPC at this IP address, like just send your transaction to that. If you tell your friend and they tell their friend and they tell their friend, all the value of my RPC is gone.
Gotcha.
So they set up firewall rules. Excuse me. I almost choked on myself. They set up firewall rules and access lists to where nobody can touch their RPC unless they have an approved IP address first. So
cool.
that's where the configuration of RPCs gets really tough for a lot of people. They don't realize that like they've probably been blacklisted by default already, and they have to like log in to the actual like portal or Discord. They have a Discord bot that's like capturing IP addresses and then whitelisting it. So
cool.
Yeah.
So and sorry, Burmpf, I know I'm taking all the questions here. The more validators the network has, the better, is what I'm assuming. That it doesn't get to a point where if there's too many that it becomes too competitive, or validators won't survive. It's the more the better. And it sounds like the more traffic we get, the more we build, that it's almost a necessity, right? For people to do these.
I mean, there's a concept in economics called Pareto optimality, where you can do things too much or too little. You want to find that optimal point is where you go. So there is an optimal amount of validators. What it is kind of unknown right now. But we know that the more validators that we have run by independent operators like myself, the more decentralized Solana becomes and therefore secure. Nobody has enough power over the blockchain to actually change the blockchain. Nobody can come along and say, I want all of Knox's SOL to be moved to my wallet without his signature because I can change the blockchain to do that. And
That's good.
yeah, I mean, that's what you want. And people take that for granted, and they think that other blockchains are just as secure, if not more secure, than Solana is. Ethereum 2.0 right now effectively has like 3 validators that control over 50% of all Ethereum.
That's why it's so damn slow, huh?
I mean,
Or it will be.
well, they're still mining. They're still mining over there. But like when the merge happens in a few weeks, like it could absolutely, not that it will, I don't think it will, but it could absolutely be overtaken, because there's only, if those 3 operators decide to collude together to take all the world's Ethereum, they could.
That's insane.
There's nothing anyone could do about it.
Nope. Because we all put our Ethereum in Coinbase and Lido and whatever the other one was. So
I'm
so fucking happy I'm not touching Ethereum right now.
that is why your
That's
tweet
terrifying.
about ETH 2.0, your ETH is staked. I saw your tweet about that, and so that makes a little more sense as to why you don't feel like comfortable having it staked. Okay.
So, and what they call this the Nakamoto coefficient, because of Satoshi Nakamoto. And the idea is, what is the minimum number of operators that it would take to overtake the blockchain and steal all the world's money? And that's the Nakamoto coefficient. So you could make up something and say like Ethereum 2.0's Nakamoto coefficient is 3, because those 3 people could do it. Solana's has grown significantly in recent history. It's like 31 or 32 at this point. And it's pretty tough to get 32 people to collude together to take all of, because all it would take is one of them to say no, and the rest don't have the power to change anything.
Yeah.
This Nakamoto coefficient comes from either more validators spinning up or the current stake accounts being distributed. People don't realize like certain well-known venture capitalists acquired extraordinary amounts of SOL in the early days. And what they then did is they stood up their own validator and staked it all there. If you go to like stakewiz.com right now, sort by stake amount, you will see validators with over 5 million SOL staked. Millions upon millions upon millions of SOL is concentrated in, some validators. But in recent history, very recent history, it is starting to be distributed. And when that happens, that increases the Nakamoto coefficient too. So
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so like that is changing the power of stake weight and where rewards go and vote effort goes throughout the Solana blockchain too. So Solana is pretty distributed in the sense that if you count RPCs and validators together, we have 3,000 operators. Compare that to some other blockchains like Near or upcoming ones like Celestia, where the way their protocol works is only 100 nodes can produce blocks. Only. Like that's it. They're the only ones who can produce blocks, and that's the protocol design. It's not that there's only 100 people. I would run a node validator right now, but I would have to immediately get into the top 100 of stake for Near to become a validator. Otherwise, my node just sits there flapping in the wind doing nothing. So
sounds extremely limited, like as far as the potential.
I mean, you need tens of millions of dollars worth of Near to break into the top 100 because, again, institutions and venture capitalists already did it.
Control it, yeah.
Yeah. So when new blockchains launch, you're either in early or you're going to struggle to break even. I'm only able to do Juicy Stake because of liquid staking pools, because of Marinade Finance and Soulblaze and Monkey DAO's DAO pool. That's really what it comes down to.
Because I remember when you tweeted about Marinade doing that. So you were you aware, or was it a kind of a shock when all that the SOL, because the SOL got deposited into your validator?
I didn't know it was going to be that much.
Okay.
So like immediately out of the gate, like some huge players used that voting mechanism to delegate a humongous amount of SOL to me.
Cool.
From Marinade. Like they voted to have like 30,000 SOL staked right away.
Oh wow.
And that shocked me. Now, since then, they have reallocated those votes. Like some went to Lifinity because they did a big partnership with Lifinity. But my nodes survived long enough to attract stake from other places. So, yeah. So, I mean, they really helped me out during the most critical and hard time, and that was getting started. I still have a long way to go, but I'm over halfway there. So
Cool. That's
the
insane.
biggies.
That's a big number, man. So congrats to you. So if you're listening and you got Soul sitting around, I'll do it for Knox because I mean, because he might not say it. He may say it, but no, I mean, it's a good way to use and help the ecosystem. And I think a lot of people don't understand truly how simple it is to stake your Solana. I mean, you can do it on just like the Phantom app. It's quick, it's easy. Like you said, it's only a 2.5 day lock if you only wanted to use it once. But and I asked you some questions about this because that was one thing that I had. I put some Soul in there to stake. Was is it does it compound? And the answer was yes. Which I mean, if you're going to be in Solana for the long term, why not? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a compounding effect that builds what you're loving. And like if you think Solana is going to go a long ways, like why not? Right?
And I do, not financial advice, but Bitcoin is the stay of power and money. It is the gold of our ecosystem, and nothing will ever happen to Bitcoin. Ethereum was first mover advantage when it came to smart contracts. That just the fact that you could deploy an application to work with a blockchain, Ethereum revolutionized the world. But Solana is the best blockchain to do it on. so that's why I'm like, if we actually want adoption to happen, we have to get back to as close to a Web 2 experience as possible.
Yep.
So shit on it all you want for being centralized, but Web 2 is the fastest, the cheapest, the most scalable solutions that there are. And that's why Amazon doesn't go down ever. Yep. And when you click order, it's ordered and it's already through their, shipment and processing and procurement. So Web 3 is not there where it is right now, but Solana is the closest to it. And that's why I think my objective in recent history has been transitioning away from NFTs. Last fall, I was NFT heavy. This spring, I whittled my positions down to basically nothing but the gods, DAA, and SMB. And that's it. The real objective for me now is to accumulate coins. And I think the best way for me to do that is to operate a validator so long as I can get it into profit. So if I were a consumer, if I were talking to consumers, I would tell these consumers, you need to sincerely think about staking your Solana, and it doesn't have to be on a validator. You can do liquid staking. That way, if you ever need the money in a pinch, you can just go swap it on a DEX right back to Sol. But in the meantime, let it grow. Don't just let Sol sit there in your wallet. And
I agree.
if you're gonna believe in Solana for the long run over the next few years, your goal should be to accumulate those coins. You should want to stack them up as high as possible while Solana is at $30.
Right.
Maybe it falls to 10 or maybe it rips to 60. But either way, the end goal for me is like Solana at like $500. That's where my sights are set. Yes. So I just want to stack as much as possible. Staking Sol adds to that stack every 3 days. So
and it's addicting. It's fun it's one of those things you like look and you see like, hey, this is how much you earned. I mean, that's really cool. And I do agree with that. And I've been in conversations about this on Twitter, and I don't know how you feel, Burmpf, but I don't think there's ever, I just don't think a society we will ever be truly decentralized. I don't think that you can ever truly work that way. And I think that there is a balance, and I think Solana is doing probably the best job at kind of finding that balance to a degree. And so if I've been like giga bullish on Solana for the more I understand about it and what it's doing. Because it's funny when I hear people, and I'm interested to hear your take on this as well, on Ethereum that are ETH maxis and whatever, is like, I don't know, maybe if it is just the NFT world, because that's mostly what I see on Twitter, is, the volume that they got, kind of the name, if you will. But as far as technology and just explaining what you have explained, in what world does that even make sense, like logically? I mean,
I think it's just because, 4 years ago, my friend was mining Ethereum. He was trying to convince me to mine Ethereum, and I said no. And he would mine multiple Ethereum a day. And, you know, back then they were $40, and he was like, oh fuck, dude, I'm making $150 a day. And he bought the big GPU racks and everything and just went nuts with that shit, you know, and
like that right there.
and yeah, that's right. Exactly. And he's a multimillionaire now. You know, he doesn't need Solana. Even though it's better
Sure.
tech, like he's at the end of the day, like Ethereum is $2,000 a coin. If Solana's price changed, the entire narrative changes.
I agree.
And I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to, is that Ethereum has just been around longer and built up more demand over time. Solana's so young.
Mhm.
And until we have either a mass adoption event in Solana, meaning somebody creates an application or a tool or a physical device that onboards new money into crypto, until that happens, we're just going to end up trading blows with each other. And we're playing this game where we're trying to steal liquidity from other blockchains. And it's tough to do that when people have already made it in Bitcoin or Ethereum. They don't need to explore anything else. So it's tough to change people's minds with that, but this is just going to happen generation after generation after generation of blockchains. Is a really truly unique and performant blockchain will do something that creates some form of mass adoption event, couple a bull run in the mix there, and people get euphoric about this new coin that they've discovered or this new app that they've discovered. Like, can you imagine how lucky Axie Infinity was that it onboarded people to play this video game in the middle of a bull run? So people played this game, they collected this worthless shit token, but that worthless shit token went up 100% every single day because people were in the middle of a bull run. Like, that would have never happened in a bear market ever.
Yeah.
And Axie Infinity managed to pull it off at like the absolute perfect timing. A mass adoption event coupled with a bull run to make people feel euphoric about their decision to join blockchain. So
That's funny.
I think it's going to take something like that for Solana. I think we're going to have Aurori and Star Atlas come out at the exact same time, which is right before the next Bitcoin halving, to kick off another mega bull run. I think if I could pick how it plays out, that's how I would pick how it plays out.
Sure. And Burmpf and I actually had the opportunity to talk to Frank on an episode here, and he talked to us a little bit afterwards about technology that DeGods are trying to build. He didn't get into specifics, but it's something, and you know, Frank does a really good job at thinking outside the box and you know, a big picture. And so I'm curious as to what this technology, because he mentioned the B2B, which I learned from him at the time, that if he can find a way, this technology to incorporate, and I don't know if it's even possible to like bring in other chains, that technology, whatever they're building, even if it just makes Solana stronger as a unit, and it's something that can bring in a Web2 business. I think that, yes, I think Solana and these, you know, DeGods are going to kind of help bridge that gap. Because I tell everybody about Solana. I love Solana. I mean, I'm full-time in Solana, you know, so it's like I'm a little biased, I guess. But just from what I understand, every time I learn more and more about it, it's just like I think that the potential is there, and it's enough for me to be, you know, heavily.
I have the bulk of my net worth, the overwhelming majority of it in Solana, and it's just because I'm a tech maxi, and I believe that I look at my mom, right? Everybody knows Nana Trades.
Dude,
and
I love your mom's tweets. She comments on my tweets, and I just like
she's such a DJ. But like, I couldn't have onboarded her into crypto without Solana, because she is accustomed to using the internet a certain way. You click on it and it's done. It works. And you can't onboard average people who aren't tech forward. Like, our generation is all tech forward. We all grew up with some form of tech, right? But there's even people within our generation that aren't tech forward. And then there's pockets of the world where they don't have access to tech. And then there's older generations that aren't interested in it. How do you onboard those people? The only way you do it is by coupling the pros of decentralization and blockchain, basically borderless currency, with instantaneous and near free transactions. That's how you do it. So now Tolley is right when he says someone needs to go build that goddamn application to make it happen. So because all the infrastructure, all the pieces are there. Now someone just has to go create the thing that people want. And that's, you know, to stop minting crypto dick butts. Like,
yes,
you know?
Yes, I think that'll help. I agree. Man.
But the last thing that I'll point out that I think is also really interesting is that we have borderless currencies and borders are still popping up. You look at, if you take a region of the world and look at their like preferences for what blockchain they use, Tron is really big in Asia. I don't know anybody who uses Tron in America.
No.
I think it's kind of interesting that, you know, geographically, people are still kind of drawing their own borders by picking a different blockchain.
Gotcha. And now is Solana like eco-friendly?
Oh yeah.
I know that's a big thing with
it's,
Ethereum, and that it's not.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, these servers sip on electricity. They don't
Nice.
consume nearly as much electricity as my ant miners do. So,
Gotcha. Well, and it's cool because I live in Salt Lake, where you know the Mountain DAO is, and Mountain Pay kind of started, right? And they actually have, from my understanding, vendors up there that have used and accepted Solana Pay.
Yeah,
and I mean that is real world adaptation. I mean, dude, all my friends, I'm like, and it's funny, I like fantasy football and some stuff this year. I've paid with Solana.
Yeah,
because my buddies are like, but like even if like you were a storefront. I mean, the amount and how fast and the minimal fees, it's just like, if you really truly understood that there's technology, that this isn't a meme coin or cryptocurrency is not just like it's not all game. Like there's actual technology. People don't understand that.
no,
But I mean, if you could go to the grocery store and you pay in like USDC, it doesn't even have to be Solana, right? Like there's not a ton of, I mean, as long as the USDC stays pegged, like there's almost zero downside. And so that I think is a big thing.
And I think to me, the biggest win is that it's borderless. I can send it to anybody around the world right now, and it'll be there within effectively 22 seconds.
That's world changing.
It'll be confirmed, and it will cost me nothing to send it.
Yeah.
That is a really hard thing for people to wrap their head around in the first world. That is like decentralization, censorship resistance, transmitting money quickly with low fees. That is a third world and second world problem. People in the first world don't get it. And that's where adoption is struggling, is because most of the money in the world is in the first world and they don't need blockchain. So that's that's why we need to, you know, maybe shift our focus a little bit towards like video gaming, you know, P2E. That will, I've said many times over that if Solana Pay and Mountain DAO set up shop on college campuses and let kids play Aurori on college campus. They'll play Aurori all day long, collect Ori coins, swap it to USDC, then walk to the Quad or the Union and pay for their meals with USDC. That is how adoption happens. This is just like Facebook in 2004. When it was thefacebook.com, it only started in colleges. That was the first social media site. But that entire generation picked up social media sites and was like, oh, this is better. Like, this is a way to communicate with people. And that's how Web 2 came to be. It was connecting people to people. It all started on college campuses because that's where the most forward-thinking, I'd say forward-thinking, the most people who were open-minded to trying a new technology were. And then they realized, oh, this is better. We're going to do that. And that's how adoption spreads. And then they teach their kids how to do it. So I have said many times over, I've been very vocal about this on all of the Solana official Twitter pages. And I was like, just do it on campus. Just go to do a campus tour, one state to the next, and introduce people to Solana Pay, and it'll be over at that point.
If you can get a college to actually accept it, they're like, and
all their vending machines, just do that. Watch what happens. These people will play video games, make money, and then go buy their food with the money that they made playing video games.
Just don't stop studying, kids.
Yeah, no, you gotta stay in school or whatever the fuck it is that you're studying. So
get that. And well, I mean, you're not even paying for your school anymore at this point. not in the States.
No.
Yeah, you get your debt forgiven. See, why would you not? So cool, that's been my thesis for a long time for mass adoption and how it should happen. Is like just assault these 19-year-olds as they're walking out of the union. And be like, use fucking Solana Pay. Like, try it now. It's an app.
I mean, if you can use Venmo or Cash Apps and scan each other's,
It's
you know,
the
fucking
exact
Venmo
same
page, or it
thing.
is. It's exactly what it is, and it's easier. Like it's, I don't know. Yeah. So no, obviously you don't have to convince me, but no, that's a cool idea. Anyway, I've talked a lot. Burmpf, I don't know if you have anything for Knox. I've kind of took over the episode today. I was excited for this one, clearly.
My brain's still back trying to figure out where all the fucking Solana fees are going. I'm like half an hour, 45 minutes back in the conversation, still trying to figure it out in my head.
Lane wrote a really good Medium article that breaks it, like literally where does every penny come from and where does it go? And it's a really interesting thing. The things that we didn't talk about is that currently Solana is inflationary. Someday it will be deflationary because of the way how the economics work. So
that'll be a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. He breaks it down in his little blog about how it all works. And that was, for me, like I deployed my validator and went, now what? What's next? How does this work? Like that was the thing that answered like literally all of my questions. So huge shout out to Lane. He is in the super minority. That is the top 31 or 32 validators by stake weight.
Okay.
So those are the Nakamoto coefficient. That is our super minority. All of the people who control the bulk of the stake in the Solana environment.
And that's cool because actually I've been on Solana Beach, the website, and I've always wondered what that was. It's like the leader. And I just didn't know if like, because it always rotated people. So I was like, well, then nobody's really
the leader is the guy
right?
who's making the block right now, and then the super minority are the top 31 validators based on stake. And just by the way it works, those are also the people who make the most blocks, because remember, for every roughly 3,000 SOL you have staked, you get to create 4 blocks. So if they have 3 million, you get to create a lot of blocks.
Right. Cool, man. Well, Knox, I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. This has been fun for me. Burmpf, I hope it was for you, man. And those that are listening, I mean, you're truly a guy that is making the space better. I think you deserve way more credit than you get. And, you know, hopefully compensated, you know, as such. Solana it'd be a bum if we ever lost you. So you know, if anything, you know, I see and hear what you do and I appreciate it. I know Burmpf's already, as soon as you started saying you made content about coding, man, he's trying to learn to code right now.
Yes.
And so I know his light bulb went off when you were talking about that. So your work matters, man. I hope you know that. And so your time, you know, I know it's valuable. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. That means a lot to me. It really does. Sometimes you need to hear it, right?
Sure. It's hard. I mean, because that's the thing. Like you said, you put in all this time and effort, and there's no compensation, you know, financial compensation. Like the direct, you might not even see what you're doing for people on the back end. But for me personally, like big fan, big fan.
Well, the people who reach out to me in my DMs and say like, "Hey, I just watched your training content," like that really means a lot to me too. Like a lot. I put a lot of effort into that, and to hear that, you know, maybe I'm helping someone change the direction of their life, because I was that person. I didn't know what an IP address was when I was 30. No clue. And I just decided one day I'm just going to change the direction of my life. I'm going to go into tech, and I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to work my way to the top. So, you know, I don't think I started learning coding until I was like 33. So, you know,
it's never too late, huh?
It's never too late, dude. What is it?
How old are you now?
37.
Okay, so a few years then.
Yeah, no, I mean, it didn't take me long to get to where I am. And, you know, if you put in the right amount of effort, which is really just about an hour a day, you can go a long way really fast. So that is one of those things, like my profession, my actual in real life job is to teach infrastructure engineering, network engineering, systems engineering. I kind of just vaulted right through that entire career path and made it all the way to the top pretty quick. And when you get to that point, you get to pick what you get to do. You get to pick where you want to work, how many hours you want to work, what you want to do. And since I had basically every certification on the planet, I was like, well, I kind of want to go back to the place where I learned all the content and create my own content, and they let me. So
Cool.
so that's my job. I teach people and I advise people, like I help people figure out the career path of IT and software and stuff like that.
Cool, man.
Earlier you mentioned that you had set up some like training materials for like doing stuff on Solana. Where can someone find that at?
Yeah, so I did Solana and Near. Near is very similar to Ethereum, so that's just one thing to point out. Solana is nothing like Ethereum. So you can find it at adept.at. So it's adept.at. From there, I think there's like a button that says like browse learning. And from there, you can go into like crypto and blockchain development, and you'll see my 2 courses. That's the only 2 courses that are there right now. My plan is to add more. I would like to add more for SWE and Aptos whenever those come live. But, you know, for someone who's like brand new to Web3 development, Ethereum created a smart contract standard, and many, if not most, smart contract blockchains kind of copied it, and they call it the Ethereum virtual machine, or EVM. So once you've deployed, you know, an NFT or a token on Ethereum, you've kind of already done it on Near or Phantom or AVAX. When you come to Solana, you're starting over from scratch. It's an entirely different world. But the thing that people don't realize, because you've been on Twitter, when you hear Twitter and Solana development, you hear Rust. And it's like, you got to learn Rust. And that's fucking bullshit. Okay? Smart contracts in Solana are written in Rust. But for someone who is actually creating a decentralized application or just learning how the Solana ecosystem works or how to program some things in Solana, you need to know JavaScript. I would say that 90%, 85% of a DApp developer's job is in JavaScript, and the rest is just kind of poking around in Rust. They actually, a guy named Armani Ferrante created the Anchor framework, and that basically scaffolds a Solana smart contract for you. And all you have to do is kind of change a few parameters here and there, and it makes it really easy. So, yeah, that's my take on that, is that learning Solana development now, if you go through my training, is really not that bad. If you've got basic JavaScript, that's going to be your happy place for a while. And when it comes to creating smart contracts, I actually created like dedicated content that's like intro to Rust, like Rust 101. Let's create Hello World of Rust. And then we ease into smart contracts and break apart like how the Anchor framework works. And then how do we add a layer of complexity to it? And we end up doing all sorts of really cool things on the blockchain.
Damn.
There you go, Burmph.
And it's free. It's free. It's free. Free for now.
Get on it while it's free.
Free for now. All right, I'm on it today.
Cool, man. Well, Knox, for those that don't know, where can we find you on socials if we can?
Yeah, best place to reach me is on Twitter. That is at Knox_trades. In Discord, I am KNOXTRADES #2784.
Very cool. Very cool. And then YouTube, what's your YouTube?
It's KNOXTRADES. You can do
KNOXTRADES?
youtube.com/C/KNOXTRADES. That C is for channel.
Okay. Cool, man. Well,
Fantastic.
we appreciate your time, brother. Thanks for it, and have a good one. I guess we'll see you next time.
Anytime, guys. Look forward to talking to you next time.
Okay. Well, see you, man.
All right. See ya.